polyglot colleagues. Thank you so much for having us and for your interest in our project. My name is Anna de Medeiros. I am a researcher with the Language Accent World Making Research Project based at King's College London. And I am here today with two colleagues who are going to introduce themselves now. Bernadette?
Hello, hi, I'm Bernadette Clinton. I'm the language consultant for the Hackney Learning Trust, which is Hackney is a small borough in North London.
Hola, yo me llamo Raquel y soy profesora de español y asesora también en el vecindario de Hackney en Londres.
Thank you very much, Bernadette and Raquel. I wanted to introduce a little bit of how we're going to proceed today. I will be asking you some questions about the wonderful Hackney project that you've been undertaking, and then you will reply, take turns replying, etc. We are also sharing a PowerPoint presentation so that colleagues can see some of the image, some of the children, some of the work that you've been doing over the years. Okay, so if you're ready then, my first question to you is, can you tell us about the situation in Hackney as regards the teaching of languages? Perhaps Bernadette?
Yes, in 2014, it became compulsory for primary schools in England to teach a language. And there was also a new curriculum introduced into secondary school. So in preparation for that, the head teachers and the education department met and decided that they would recommend to all the heads that one language was taught as the first language. So they decided on Spanish. So every school teaches Spanish as their first language. And the secondary schools also all teach French, some teach Mandarin, some teach Arabic, Turkish, so a variety of languages as well. So we were appointed as consultants then to implement that throughout Hackney. So in time for the new curriculum in 2014, we had all schools beginning to implement this new language. Some started to do it across the whole from year 7 to 11, some started with 1 year and built it up. It was meant to be a 4-year project.
Muchas escuelas empezaron también desde infantil. Yo personalmente creo que enseñar español o cualquier idioma desde infantil tiene muchas ventajas, porque los alumnos adquieren la nueva lengua de manera más natural y más rápida, y también la pronunciación es mucho mejor. Y no solo eso, al estar todos los profesores, todo el equipo educativo en el proyecto, el estatus de la asignatura es más alto y hay más respeto también.
Thank you very much. And I think that gives us a good overview of the project. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the consultants who were appointed to implement the borough policy in the teaching of languages and how they've contributed to the whole borough approach.
I think it was really important that you had some people to overview the project that had a strategic plan for the whole of the borough and were able to implement things at that level. So to move things forward, look at what the needs were. So for example, there was a lot of need for training of the teachers, both in methodology, but also developing their own language skills. So that was done on a borough basis. The head teachers were all in support of it because they voted to bring this in. They released the teachers for half a day every half term to get that training, to build up the networks, to have that strategic overview and to be able to support their teachers on a borough-wide basis, not individually and not isolated in one school, which is what the situation had been before that. We also had and still have a steering group, which includes heads and senior leaders in the education department that keep driving the project forward.
Y si recuerdas, antes de esta iniciativa y de este plan estratégico, había varias escuelas en en Hackney, que ya estaban enseñando idiomas. Algunas estaban enseñando español, otras italiano, un poco de francés, pero no había ni consistencia ni tampoco un plan a largo plazo que demostrara ningún tipo de progreso. Los profesores estaban completamente solos, incluso dentro de su propia escuela, y no había ningún tipo de training para ellos tampoco.
That's excellent. Glad that consistency is something that is now possible. I was wondering if you would be able to tell us a little bit more about how the borough ensures high quality provision, especially in the primary schools.
We've been involved a lot in modelling of lessons, doing team teaching, training those teachers in their classrooms. Part of that has been where they've got a specialist teacher, insisting that the class teacher is there as well, so that they're able to have on-the-job training working alongside the specialist teacher with their own class. And so we've had the whole monitoring programme. In 2016, we also set up what we call the Hackney Primary Spanish Award, which was criteria that we set out that we thought every school should meet. So it's at 3 levels of bronze, silver and gold. And we're working for every school to have received the bronze level. That gave us the opportunity then to look at, observe their lessons, look at their the material, their paperwork, their evidence, interview pupils, and just see how each school was getting on and whether they should receive the bronze or a higher level of the award.
And if we go to the next slide in the PowerPoint, there are some examples there of schools collecting the prize, the award. El Premio Español Primaria es algo que celebramos en las escuelas, es un orgullo tanto para los padres, los profesores, la comunidad en general, y nos hace estar muy orgullosos. Es lo mismo otra vez. La importancia de la asignatura cambia totalmente dentro de la escuela. Se incorpora en el plan de estudios de una manera mucho más sólida.
Great. And yes, I think ensuring that the schools are working together and that there's a sense of pride for all the achievements is excellent. I was wondering if you could now maybe tell us a little bit more about how the schools, the primary schools, make time to fit in the teaching of a language.
Sí. Si podemos volver a la siguiente diapositiva, the next slide as well, tenemos algunos ejemplos aquí. El proceso comienza siempre con la comunicación entre el profesor de español, en este caso de Hackney, o el jefe de departamento y el director de la escuela. Una vez que el director de la escuela se da cuenta de la importancia de la asignatura y el equipo directivo decide que la asignatura es importante en la escuela y que es una parte vital del plan de estudios, ahí ya no hay problemas con cuándo se va a enseñar español, o vamos a enseñar español hoy y la próxima semana no hay problema. Si la junta directiva de la escuela está detrás de la asignatura, como dice Paul Thomas, el director de Parkwood Primary International Spanish School, lo más importante es que la gente que trabaja en la escuela sea consciente de la importancia de los idiomas dentro del plan de estudios. Si los profesores, los docentes, los teaching assistants, asistentes, pero también el resto de trabajadores está concienciado de la importancia de la asignatura, no hay problema. Y siempre hay que asegurarse que el tiempo de la asignatura en el horario está protegido. Lo mismo que se hace con educación física cuando viene un sport coach, un entrenador de fuera, que además ayuda con el desarrollo de los profesores que después pueden también enseñar una clase de español ellos mismos. ¿Tú qué opinas, Bernadette?
No, estoy de acuerdo, sí.
And I can certainly attest to what you're saying, Raquel, because when I visited the your wonderful Parkwood Primary International Spanish School, I was able to see the children in their sports class, and the sports tutor had learned enough Spanish to be able to speak to the children in Spanish, and they were reacting perfectly normal and going about doing their sport activities, but enjoying it in Spanish, which was wonderful to see. I was also now, if you can tell me a little bit more about making sure that Spanish is taught across the whole school curriculum.
Yeah, the slide gives you some examples there of the things that we do. So in addition to doing the training for the specialist teachers and the subject leaders in Spanish, we also do whole staff meetings, because we think it's the responsibility of the whole staff to see what they can do to enhance the Spanish provision, because we know full well that in schools, if they just have one Spanish lesson a week, the next week the teacher has got to spend a lot of time revisiting what they did the week before, and the progress is very slow. So what we do is staff meetings for the whole staff and show them how they can do things on a daily basis, do the register, do the date, do the weather, just so the children are hearing Spanish on a daily basis and reinforcing the work that they've done. So we do insist on that. Things like having displays which have double labelling, so it's in Spanish and in English, becomes a real part of the school life. Involving things, for example, because we're very close to Arsenal, the Arsenal Double Club has done a lot of work with us, particularly secondary schools, where they're doing football training through Spanish. And we've had very close links with them, and some of the coaches have worked a lot with some of our secondary schools as well on that. And this year, we've also had beginning a link with the Hackney Music Service as a separate music service, and we've been working with them on implementing some Spanish as part of their music curriculum as well.
Y es muy interesante ver cómo los alumnos están motivados cuando son capaces de crear conexiones entre lo que aprenden en la clase de español y lo que aprenden en otras asignaturas, como podemos ver, por ejemplo, en la diapositiva. Se sienten más confidentes, hablan en español durante la clase de literatura o de ciencias, también en arte o en educación física, como hemos dicho, y estas conexiones ayudan también con el aprendizaje de los nuevos contenidos.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's wonderful that the children are learning Spanish and then having the opportunity to see how it's part of such a international culture, and sport and music are so international by definition. It's great for them to have those opportunities. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit more about how you've involved other members of staff who aren't Spanish teachers in the project.
Pues sí, como hemos mencionado también en la pregunta anterior, los profesores tienen que revisar el español a diario, con pequeñas cosas como la fecha, como qué tiempo hace hoy, pero también tenemos otras rutinas en la escuela, como por ejemplo utilizar español durante las comidas. Los niños pueden preguntar qué hay para comer hoy, o decir me gusta o no me gusta, odio el pescado, quiero más agua, más pan. Y tenemos un incentivo que es darle puntos para sus grupos de la escuela si están utilizando el español ahí. Además, también el profesor de educación física en muchas escuelas ya de Hackney, no solo en Parkwood, pero en numerosas escuelas, está integrando el español en sus clases. Estamos hablando de unidades didácticas más crosscurriculares también con el profesor de español. Las asistentes, los TAs, en muchas ocasiones ayudan a los niños a jugar juegos españoles en el patio, como el pañuelo o el castro, y las escuelas participan todo lo que pueden en proyectos Erasmus para asegurarse que la competencia lingüística de los docentes es suficientemente buena como para ayudar. Y no es solo para los docentes. Cuando hemos ido a viajes a España con el Erasmus, hemos llevado gente que trabaja en la cocina, en el equipo administrativo, en la junta directiva de la escuela y, por supuesto, los profesores también.
And also, if I just add, because the teachers are in the class as well when the Spanish lesson is taking place, the class teachers are learning alongside the children, which is really nice for the children to see that these teachers are still learners and they're still trying to improve their skills. And we had a lovely little video of in the assessments that we do at the end of the year, that Raquel had the teachers doing the assessments, doing the speaking pair role plays with the children, and they were being assessed as well. So that was really quite good. It's quite a powerful image.
Y una cosa más también, no solo los profesores, también los PGC students que tenemos en la escuela tienen que hacer al menos 2 clases de español durante el tiempo que están en nuestra escuela. Entonces, todo el mundo está involucrado completamente.
That's wonderful. Wonderful examples of how you're co-creating, you know, the learning environment. I was wondering if you could also tell us how you involve the students in promoting and leading the Spanish work.
Sí, los alumnos hacen maravillas, asisten a eventos de difusión y a conferencias, hablan del trabajo que hacen en frente de...
The other slide.
Sí, sí, la siguiente. Muestran todo lo que hacen, pero también organizan eventos para recaudar fondos, por ejemplo, para el viaje a España o para la fiesta de San Valentín. Algunos grupos pequeños, desde el año 3 al año 6, visitan escuelas secundarias y enseñan español a alumnos de secundaria entre 12 y 16 años, igual que los líderes del lenguaje, los Young Language Leaders de secundaria, que vienen a las escuelas primarias también y dan clases de español a los niños más jóvenes. También algunas escuelas tienen lo que se llaman embajadores del español, que son los que están a cargo de asegurarse que se practica español en los pasillos, abriendo la puerta, gracias, y que los profesores hacen el daily recap de español. Si no lo hacen, le ponen una cruz y cuando vuelve el profesor especialista se queda sin recreo, básicamente. Sí. Entonces se aseguran y motivan al resto de los alumnos a practicar español a diario fuera del aula.
And if you look at some of the photos on this slide, the children are presented at teachers training events. Mm-hmm. So on the left-hand one there, they're presenting to our annual conference, which, you know, for young children, that's really quite a big thing. And the photo there of the two in Parliament, where they presented to the all-party parliamentary group for languages and went to the House of Lords and were very confident to talk about, weren't they, about what they did. So we try and give them opportunities as well to build their confidence to do those presentations, which I think is really important.
Y si puedo añadir, en la primera foto donde hay niños presentando, la niña más joven es de año 2, de segundo, y el más mayor en este caso es de sexto. Y sus presentaciones eran en español. La niña de segundo hizo un poco de Spanglish, pero tuvimos profesores nativos pensando y diciéndonos, pero estos niños hablan español en casa, ¿no? Y nosotros, no, ninguno de ellos habla español en casa como otra lengua. Todos son, bueno, hay alguno que habla turco, pero ninguno habla español en casa. Entonces...
That's really wonderful. And I must say, the first time I met you and I saw the children was indeed in the House of Lords, and they basically, their performance told me all I needed to know about how wonderful this project was, because not only could they speak English and Spanish, and they'd gone to Spain, it was really their confidence that came across.
Yeah.
And you can see how they've benefited overall from being part of this wonderful, international cultural teaching environment. I was wondering if you could tell us all also a little bit of how a visitor who might come to visit your school would understand how Spanish is part of the learning environment in the school.
Yeah. Well, so one is very evident at Parkwood because there's a big sign outside the the school, saying Parkwood is an international Spanish school, and that's been awarded by the Spanish Ministry of Education for schools abroad. So that was a really prestigious award. But as you go in, you see they've got the sign in the foyer showing that they've got the gold level of the Hackney Primary Spanish Award. They've got the full level of the International School Award, which is the British Council Award, which we also promote. And then as you go through the school, you see not only displays of visits to Spain, to the partner school in Spain, but also interactive displays where the pupils can come and change. There's some questions in the displays and they can change the answers, they can do some little sums, etc. And so that they're interacting with the displays, they're not just there, to be looked at, if you like, but also that in every classroom, you'll also see displays of signs, you'll see it's very evident things that the class teachers can use, signs just saying, good morning, etc., are in every classroom. And then in the case of Parkwood, they've also got a designated Spanish and art room as well that they work on together. So it's very clear as you walk in that this is very much part of the curriculum, the signs in the lunch hall, etc. So every part of it you can see, and not just only Parkwood, but other, particularly primary schools as well.
Yeah. Los murales son una exigencia para incluso para el premio primaria en bronce.
Sí.
Tenemos que tener murales en las escuelas. Tenemos que tener murales que son pues de vocabulario diario que se utiliza, pero también del topic que se está hablando. Este año hemos trabajado más con los murales interactivos porque vemos que tienen mucho más efecto. No están solo ahí en la pared, sino que los niños escriben respuestas, escriben su nombre, les das una pegatina o un punto y son felices. Y claro, tienes toda la evidencia en las paredes.
Sí.
Great. And of course, when schools are back with children in the school grounds, that's a primary moment for them to learn. But of course, children need to continue their learning outside of the school time. Can you tell us a little bit about how you involve parents in supporting the Spanish learning?
Sí, específicamente en estos tiempos de pandemia en los que vivimos, los padres han apoyado a sus hijos muchísimo. Con todas las actividades que hemos enviado online, incluso en mi caso en Parkwood ha sido muy interesante y también muy gratificante ver cómo algunos padres han hecho las mismas actividades que sus hijos ellos mismos y me han enviado para que le haga el marking y se lo corrija y para demostrar que están aprendiendo español con los niños. No solo les dicen, este es el trabajo de español, hacerlo, pero los padres están muy involucrados. En algunas escuelas, por ejemplo en Dublín, los padres durante la pandemia han grabado recetas de cocina de países que hablan español y las han puesto en la website del colegio. Los padres asisten y apoyan todos los eventos que hacemos para recaudar dinero. Asisten a clases de español que Hackney organiza para padres. Apoyan a los niños porque hay muchas escuelas, tú sabes el número exacto, que llevan niños de quinto o sexto a España cada año. Entonces apoyan a sus hijos para ir a estos viajes, pero también atienden todas las reuniones que hay antes y después de los viajes. La verdad que los padres colaboran muchísimo y los padres hispanohablantes a menudo vienen a la escuela y leen cuentos en español o hacen talleres de zumba o de salsa, cocinan en ocasiones especiales. Los padres son lo mejor.
And allowing their children of 10 and 11-year-old to take part in the exchanges as well. We've had 12 primary schools that have taken their year 5, their 10 and 11-year-olds to Spain to work with their partner school to find out what life is like for children in Spain, etc. So the parents have been very supportive of that and have given their permission for classes to go. So that's been really important as well.
Excellent. And children are back. They can maintain contact with their peers in Spain via video links and conversations and things like that. That's excellent. I was wondering if you can tell us, obviously your school has the support of its governing body. How are the governors involved in this work?
Pues en la siguiente diapositiva tenemos de hecho las palabras de Karen, que es la Governor Link de español y de las asignaturas creativas en Parkwood. Pero lo que hacen pues es reciben y discuten los informes y todo el trabajo que el profesor de español o el jefe de departamento hace, vienen y observan clases, hablan con los alumnos sobre las experiencias que tienen y preguntan por el feedback. También asisten y nos apoyan muchísimo en cualquier evento que hacemos, tanto para recaudar fondos como para promocionar el español, por ejemplo, en la Semana del Español. Y revisan a final de curso los resultados, el progreso y cuáles son los planes futuros para la escuela. Por ejemplo, este año hablábamos de cómo podemos mejorar la provisión de español si volvemos a estar en cuarentena otra vez. Si hay otro lockdown, ¿qué vamos a hacer? ¿Qué podemos mejorar? Y ahí Karen lo explica. Y podéis ver, de hecho, que una de las cosas que hemos hecho durante la cuarentena ha sido arte en español y esa foto es de Karen, nuestra governor, como Frida Kahlo. Entonces, puedes ver que participan también mientras la escuela ha estado cerrada. Y tú puedes explicar lo que son los governors, quizás.
Yeah, I don't know if people know that in England, every school has to have a governing board of people who have the overall legal responsibility for what happens in the school, for the curriculum, for the progress of children, for the finance, etc. It's a very powerful body. And also the governors have to intervene in the curriculum and support those teachers. In our Hackney Primary Spanish Award, that is one of the criteria of the getting the Bronze Award, that there has to be a link governor that is linked with the Spanish and that has that responsibility, goes to observe lessons, sees what the progress is, supports the leader of the Spanish work. So it's very important for us. It might obviously not the same everywhere in the world, but it's very important that they are involved and they are engaged and they're supporting the work that we're doing.
Oh, it's wonderful that you managed to bring together the governors, the parents, the other staff, and the children, and all together really have this wonderful team effort. Obviously, learning a language is more than just learning how to speak the language. Could you tell us a little bit about how you include intercultural understanding in your language teaching?
Yeah, I think there's something on the next slide, is there? Yeah. Well, we're very much of the mind that it's impossible to learn a language without immersing yourself in the culture and looking at the context of how that language develops, what people who speak that language, how they see the world, etc. So that's very central to the work that we do, and being so important with Spanish that it's throughout all the countries in the world where Spanish is the official language. So we don't just rely on Spain. Also because we do have families in the borough that have come from South America, particularly from Colombia or Ecuador, Bolivia. So we do have a very rich source, if you like, of real people who speak those languages. So everything that we do and embedded in our curriculum is that we do, as Raquel has said, look at the art of Spanish-speaking countries. We've done a lot of work around music, celebrations, linking with a partner school. Some of those are in Spain, some of those, because obviously that's easier for us in terms of visiting each other, but we do have other links in other countries. We have one school that has a link in Ecuador, for example. We did a Skype program with schools in Argentina. So we do try and make that link that it is the whole of the Hispanic speaking world. And we also are very lucky that we have a lot of artists, Cuban artists, for example, musicians who live in Hackney, and are very happy to come in and talk to the pupils and play for them, etc. And then we have themed things within our scheme of learning around Christmas, festivals, etc. So celebrating those as well.
Y muy importante es la Semana Hispana que tenemos todos los años. Cada escuela celebra durante una semana entera. Es una celebración maravillosa de todas las culturas de cualquier país de habla hispana. Por ejemplo, la comida en la escuela toda la semana en las escuelas de Hackney es comida de países hispanohablantes. Tenemos asambleas donde vienen, pues como ha dicho Bernadette, músicos de Colombia, de Venezuela. Tenemos ahí a los mariachis en la diapositiva. Es algo que incluye de nuevo a toda la comunidad de la escuela, porque los padres son bienvenidos, las escuelas secundarias, por ejemplo, vienen y hacen talleres con nosotros, cocinando guacamole o leyendo cuentos a los niños de infantil y de primero y segundo. Es de verdad una celebración maravillosa, pero eso no significa que durante el resto del año no celebramos también la cultura. Por ejemplo, en la foto, creo que es en una de las fotos, se puede ver que hay una niña tirando de las orejas a un profesor porque es su cumpleaños. Entonces, cuando hay un cumpleaños en la clase, el cumpleaños feliz se canta en español. Y en España tiramos de las orejas tantas veces como años tienes. Eso está ahí en la escuela ya como parte de nuestra cultura. Las pequeñas cosas también.
Excellent. Now I'm hungry. I can't wait for your next Hispanic Week celebration. Obviously, you are in a primary school and you teach your children there, but then, of course, they go on to secondary school. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance and how you feel that the transition from primary to secondary school works and how is it possible to support that smooth transition for the children?
Okay, I think we've got some things on the next slide here. The reason that one language was chosen to be taught in both as the first non-English language in both primary and secondary was so that there could be that whole approach right the way from primary into secondary school, into GCSE, into post-16. So that was the reason that one language was chosen, to aid that transition and also enable the children to achieve a high in one language. So we don't do that. We set up hubs of secondary and their feeder primary schools who work together on things that we've already said, language ambassadors coming in, giving lessons. And it's also very important to us that we have, at the end of year 6, we have statements which the children need to have completed by the end of year 6, and that information and that data is transferred to all our secondary schools, and that's done electronically. So we have a very good data team, and they know where the children are going, and enables the secondary teachers then to know what they've done, what they've covered, and that they can build from that and not have to restart and start doing the things that the children have already done.
Además, la transición es muy importante, no solo para los alumnos, pero para los profesores, porque es más fácil planear clases al nivel real de esos alumnos. La comunicación entre las escuelas primarias y las secundarias desde que tenemos esta estrategia en el vecindario es totalmente maravillosa ahora. Antes era muy pobre. Ahora mismo no solo hacemos muchas actividades juntas durante el año, como ir con grupos de niños a enseñar a una escuela o a la otra, o hacer una taster lesson en Year 7, pero también los niños aprenden juntos, practican juntos, se ayudan y progresan juntos en primaria y en secundaria. Incluso los profesores, algunos, todavía no muchos, pero tenemos esto como algo, se han ido a observar unos a los otros también, y queremos ahora hacer un pequeño intercambio, que los profesores de primaria vayan y hagan una clase en secundaria y los de secundario vengan a primaria y también enseñen un poco de español ahí. Entonces.
Excellent. And of course, we all want our students to continue to learn outside of the classroom. Can you speak a little bit about how you ensure that pupils see the language as a life skill rather than a subject like any other that they learn in the classroom?
Sí. Bueno, creo que no solamente es la manera en la que hablan español, como dijimos en la parte cross-curricular, pero también, por ejemplo, para mí el mayor ejemplo es esos niños en la diapositiva hablando con los ancianos y la gente de un pequeño pueblo en España, justo al lado de Portugal, como si se conocieran de toda la vida. ¿Y cómo llegamos a esto, Bernadette? Pues trabajando con un montón de agencias, aprovechamos todo lo que hay y sacamos el máximo partido a todo. Colaboramos con la Consejería de Educación, el Instituto Cervantes.
British Council, and we just try and take every opportunity we can to show them that this work outside of the classroom. So when there was the Sorolla exhibition at the National Gallery, we were involved with that, where our children did paintings in the style of Sorolla. Sí. And then an Oxford College was having a Sorolla Day, and they invited us down to bring our paintings and to exhibit them. So we did that. So we're trying for all those opportunities. The Wallace Collection, for example, asked us if we could work with them on a year 4, so for 9-year-olds, a project. They've only got 3 Velázquez in the Wallace Collection, but to work on those and how they could do a project with those 3. So we've done that, and schools can bring a whole classes and work with their trainers on those 3 paintings.
Las historias de Raúl también.
Oh, yeah.
Tenemos 2 historias de Raúl, que son libros originales que hemos escrito y que se basan se localizan en 2 museos de Hackney, el Museo del Hogar y la Casa Tudor que hay cerca de Homerton. Estos libros son libros cortos que pueden usarse a finales de Key Stage 2, pero también en Key Stage 3, y los niños van al museo después de leer el libro y tienen un workshop donde tienen que buscar cosas alrededor de una casa Tudor. Pero, por ejemplo, también tenemos autores españoles, como se puede ver en la diapositiva en el medio, que a través del Instituto Cervantes vienen y hacen storytelling para toda la escuela entera en el patio, por ejemplo, que los niños lo disfrutaron muchísimo.
Yeah. And with Skinner's Academy, who work very closely with the Arsenal Double Club, their students had the chance to go and interview in Spanish the previous manager, Unai Emery, and they were videoed doing that. So Arsenal did that, and they were interviewing him as if they were, press, asking questions about the team. So again, they were using those skills, but in a very real context.
Y también podemos mencionar cómo los antiguos alumnos que ahora están en secundaria se convierten en mentores, porque, por ejemplo, cuando hacemos actividades de transición, tenemos antiguos alumnos que ahora están en Year 9, 10 o 11, hablando de cómo ha sido la experiencia de aprender español en primaria para ellos en secundaria. Y lo mejor de todo es no solo ver que son tan positivos, sino que todos los que entrevistamos este año van a hacer GCSE en español. Lo han decidido ya. Para mí eso es lo más importante, claro, porque de ahí a los A-level también en español.
Wonderful to see that the children are continuing and developing their love of Spanish. And of course, when you take them, for example, to the Wallace collection, they have the opportunity to interact with the French 18th century paintings that are there, etc. So Spanish is a gateway to other cultures and other possibilities. So that's lovely. I just have a couple more questions. Please bear with me. I wanted to ask you if you, how do you get the most out of the support from external agencies at local, national, international levels? You mentioned Erasmus, you mentioned the British Council, the Cervantes. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Locally, we use things like we have the Rio Cinema, which puts on Spanish films for teachers to take pupils to. Local restaurants, we've got Cuban, Venezuelan, as well as Spanish restaurants. So we've organised the They put on lunches for the children where they've got to order in Spanish. The museums we've already mentioned that we link in with those. And we just, whatever we do, you can see from this slide, photo there of Parkwood getting their British Council Award, the International School Award, with John Rolfe, who's a key person in the British Council. So we work very closely with them as well, and they support our work that we do. Nationally, as we've said, we work with the Consejería de Educación. We work with King's. We work with whatever universities we can. On there, you can see we worked with the British Academy and Essex and Southampton universities on a white paper for languages that was written there by the British Academy, and it's a photo of Parkwood pupils that is on the front page of the report, which is very nice. Yeah. I think a lot of the other things we have mentioned.
We have already, yes.
And I'm very glad we have a photo of Raúl.
Sí.
Yes, yeah, he's our favourite. Yes.
Excellent. I was wondering if you tell us a little bit more about the future plans to ensure that the work in Hackney is maintained, developed in a sustainable way.
Pues todos los años impartimos formación para los nuevos profesores o los nuevos jefes de departamento, porque creemos que eso es muy importante. Y claro, seguimos también desarrollando la formación de los profesores y de los jefes de departamento que ya estaban en el vecindario. Y ahora lo que tenemos una prioridad es con CLIL o AICLE en español. Empezamos con una escuela secundaria y 2 primarias, pero este año tenemos 9 más, o
no, 12.
12 más que van a estar haciendo proyectos de CLIL. Seguimos produciendo historias de Raúl, que acabamos de terminar la 3ª, estará disponible pronto, y además son gratuitas. Quiero decir, no hay que, las pueden acceder desde cualquier escuela, desde cualquier lugar, y buscamos sobre todo fuentes para financiarnos, porque realmente en secundaria tienen un poco más de suerte en un departamento de idiomas, aún así no tienen mucho dinero, pero en primaria un departamento de idiomas puede tener una financiación anual de entre 50 libras y 500 libras si tienes mucha suerte, que yo nunca he tenido tanta suerte. Entonces tenemos que financiarnos ahora mismo con el Erasmus, pero cuando el Erasmus desaparezca, por desgracia, esperamos poder ayudar a nuestros niños a viajar a España con el programa de intercambios del British Council y con lo que podamos, ¿sí? Pero básicamente seguir trabajando muy duro, seguir motivando a los estudiantes, a los profesores y nada más, ¿no? Hablar español en Hackney.
No, that's excellent. And obviously your hard work and dedication absolutely shows through. And that was my last question. And I really just want to thank you both and indeed pass on the thanks to all the other teachers and members of staff and parents who are involved in making this such a success. It's really an inspirational project. And I hope that our talk this morning shows a little bit of how it's done in your school, of how it could be done in other schools, but also more importantly about how much of this is about what goes on outside of the classroom, outside of the school, and really involves the whole community and allows the students to interact with the full community around them, not just within the school. But thank you very much, Raquel. Thank you very much, Bernadette.
Muchas gracias, Raquel.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Adiós. Again.
Obrigada. Bye.